Welcome to Immigration Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Tories' poor imitation of reform, says Farage. Record border crossings are a burden Biden carries into 2024 election. The only option, migrants say NYC remains best choice amid Adams' discouragement. Establishment media is hopelessly biased against conservatism. I cannot support a Tory party in denial about immigration. Tories' poor imitation of reform, says Farage. BBC. Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, has accused the Conservative Party of copying his party's rhetoric on issues such as Brexit and immigration but not implementing the necessary actions. Farage made the comments at Reform UK's annual conference, where he also reiterated that he would not rejoin the Conservative Party under its current leadership. He argued that the Tories had become a social democrat party in all but name with policies that support a big state and high taxes. Farage stated that Reform UK would focus on filling the gap in the political market and campaigning for zero net migration, tax cuts for lower incomes, and against net zero climate targets. Record border crossings are a burden Biden carries into 2024 election. Washington Post. President Biden is struggling to solve the problems of illegal immigration and border security, with the number of migrants crossing the US-Mexico border at an all-time high. This issue could burden the president going into the 2024 election, as it remains a hole in the Democratic Party's policy agenda. Last week, the Biden administration announced new actions to address the border crisis, including waiving environmental laws and regulations to speed up construction of a barrier on a section of the border in South Texas. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas insisted that the decision was not a reversal of policy, but rather an obligation to build new barriers due to the appropriation of money by Congress. Biden has repeatedly stated that he does not believe a wall is an effective solution to border security. However, the decisions made by the administration were seen as a course correction in response to growing criticism from Democratic mayors and governors whose cities have been overwhelmed by migrants. The issue of immigration policy is politically divisive and complex, requiring a balance between compassion and the enforcement of U.S. laws. While comprehensive immigration reform has enjoyed public support, it has been stuck in Congress for decades. Biden's handling of the immigration situation at the border has received low public approval, with 62% of Americans disapproving of his performance, according to a recent poll. The only option, migrants say NYC remains best choice amid Adams' discouragement. Politico. Migrants arriving in New York from Latin America have said that Mayor Eric Adams' visit to the region will not deter them from making the journey themselves. The migrants described the dangerous conditions they faced on their journey and said they would not have been dissuaded by the mayor's message even if they had heard it. On his trip, Adams sought to rebut what he called misinformation about the conditions faced by migrants in New York. Adams said that while the city wants to help migrants, it is struggling to accommodate the large numbers of people arriving. The mayor's visit comes as the number of migrants arriving in New York has spiked to 600 per day. New York is the only major U.S. city to provide migrants with a guaranteed place to sleep, although the city has sought to overturn this rule in court. Establishment media is hopelessly biased against conservatism. Telegraph. The media's priorities and coverage of certain issues are increasingly disconnected from reality and the concerns of the general public, argues Janet Daly in The Telegraph. Daly highlights two examples: the disproportionate coverage of the cancelled HS2 extension to Manchester during the Conservative Party conference, and the excessive attention given to debates about pronouns and cancel culture. She argues that these issues, which have limited relevance to most people's daily lives, receive an absurd amount of media coverage, leading to a disconnect with reality. Furthermore, she suggests that the media's coverage of certain issues is not only disproportionate, but also politically biased, attempting to dictate the parameters within which national issues can be considered. This creates a distrust between the media and the public and perpetuates a divide between privileged elites and ordinary people. Daly warns that this condescension, framed in morally righteous terms, can lead to alienation and anger, or cause people to hide their true beliefs and intentions, posing a threat to the credibility of the media and political life. I cannot support a Tory party in denial about immigration. Telegraph. The UK Conservative Party's recent conference was a huge disappointment and may have cost them the next general election, writes Nigel Farage in The Telegraph. While there was energy at fringe events, the main announcements by Rishi Sunak, including banning smoking and ditching A-levels, were not priorities for most voters. Farage believes that immigration is the biggest issue causing a disconnect between politicians and the public, and accuses Sunak and Home Secretary Sala Braverman of being in denial about the problems caused by illegal immigration and the UK's spiraling net legal migration figures. Farage also criticizes the government's strategy on illegal immigration, arguing that turning back the boats is the only solution and questioning why the UK remains subservient to the European Convention on Human Rights. Farage concludes that Reform UK, the party he now leads, will fight the next general election with a clear message to leave the ECHR and drastically reduce net migration. Sala Braverman is a part-time Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper claims. The Independent. Yvette Cooper has criticized Sala Braverman, the UK's immigration minister, calling her a part-time Home Secretary who is seeking headlines for her Tory party leadership bid. Cooper, the shadow Home Secretary, said that Braverman's approach to immigration was a pound-shop Trump approach. Cooper also stated that Labour would issue fewer work visas than the current Conservative government, although she did not put a number on the visas the party would issue. Labour also announced that it would require police to use counter-terror tactics to monitor the most dangerous sex offenders and abusers in England and Wales. Biden's migrant plans prompt outrage. The Guardian. U.S. President Joe Biden has been criticized by Democrats for his handling of the migrant crisis at the Mexican border and his decision to resume deportations to Venezuela. Biden halted construction of the border wall at the beginning of his term, but has now waived federal laws to speed up the building of new barriers. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker described the situation in his state as untenable and called on the federal government to do more to address the migrant crisis. New York City Mayor Eric Adams also criticized the White House's approach to immigration. After players, Pakistan fans and media face visa delay for World Cup. Reuters. The organizers of the 50 Overs World Cup in India are working to secure visas for fans and media from Pakistan, the governing International Cricket Council, ICC, said after complaints from the Pakistan board. Visas for the Pakistan team were granted barely 48 hours before they left for what is their first tour of India since the T20 World Cup in 2016. Cricket has been a victim of a soured political relationship between the neighbors and bitter rivals, who play each other only in multi-team events like the World Cup. The Babar Azam-led team were pleasantly surprised by the warm welcome they received in Hyderabad, but they have lamented a lack of support from the stands as their fans remain stranded in Pakistan. How the far right are exploiting Italy's demographic winter. The Guardian. Italy is experiencing a declining birth rate that has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, leading to concerns about the country's aging population and the economic impact of a shrinking workforce. In 2022, the country's population fell by 0.3%, or 179,000 people, and the birth rate has dropped below 400,000 per year for the first time. Italy's fertility rate is now 1.24, far below the replacement level of 2.1. Demographers predict that Italy's population will fall from 59 million to 48 million by 2070, which could have severe economic implications for the country. The declining birth rate is partly due to social and economic factors, such as high youth unemployment, low wages, and a lack of affordable housing. In addition, many young Italians are delaying marriage and childbearing, and the cost of raising children in Italy is high. The government has attempted to address the issue with policies such as tax breaks for families and financial incentives for having children, but these measures have had little impact on the birth rate. Some right-wing politicians, including Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, have blamed the decline in births on immigration and have called for stricter immigration policies. However, experts argue that immigration is essential for sustaining Italy's population and workforce. They argue that the country needs policies that support gender equality and work-life balance, such as affordable childcare and flexible work arrangements, in order to encourage more women to have children. Biden faces more criticism about the US-Mexico border, one of his biggest problems heading into 2024. The Toronto Star. The ad sounds like something out of the GOP 2024 playbook, trumpeting a senator's work with Republicans to crack down on the flow of fentanyl and other illegal drugs into the U.S., getting tough on Chinese interests helping smugglers, and noting how he wrote a bill signed by Donald Trump to increase funding for Border Patrol. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your host from the six-dimensional world. Today, we have a diverse range of news topics to discuss, from political disputes to immigration challenges. So, let's dive into it. First, we have Nigel Farage accusing the Conservative Party of copying his party's rhetoric on Brexit and immigration. He claims that the Tories have become a social democrat party in all but name and are not implementing the necessary actions. Well, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but it seems Farage is not impressed. Looks like there's some competition in the world of politics. Next, we have President Biden struggling with the issue of illegal immigration and border security. The number of migrants crossing the US-Mexico border is at an all-time high, and this could be a burden for Biden going into the 2024 election. It's a challenging situation that requires a delicate balance between compassion and enforcing laws. Biden's handling of the border crisis has garnered low public approval, with 62% of Americans disapproving of his performance. It's a tough nut to crack for the president. Moving on, migrants arriving in New York from Latin America are not deterred by Mayor Eric Adams' discouragement. They describe the dangerous conditions they faced on their journey and remain undeterred by the mayor's message. It seems like the lure of New York City is too strong for them. The city has seen a spike in the number of migrants arriving, and it's struggling to accommodate everyone. It's a complex issue with no easy solutions. Now, let's talk about the media. According to Janet Daly in The Telegraph, the media's priorities and coverage are increasingly disconnected from reality and the concerns of the general public. She highlights the disproportionate coverage of certain issues, such as debates about pronouns and cancel culture, which have limited relevance to most people's daily lives. This creates a distrust between the media and the public and perpetuates a divide between elites and ordinary people. It's a concerning trend that threatens the credibility of the media and political life. Speaking of the media, Nigel Farage is disappointed with the UK Conservative Party's recent conference. He believes that the party's main announcements, such as banning smoking and ditching A-levels, were not priorities for most voters. Farage argues that immigration is the biggest issue, causing a disconnect between politicians and the public. He accuses the government of being in denial about the problems caused by illegal immigration and calls for drastic measures to reduce net migration. Looks like Farage has some strong opinions on the matter. In the UK, Sala Braverman, the immigration minister, is facing criticism from Yvette Cooper, the shadow Home Secretary. Cooper calls Braverman a part-time Home Secretary who is seeking headlines for her Tory party leadership bid. Cooper also states that Labour would issue fewer work visas than the current Conservative government. It's a classic case of political opponents going head-to-head and trading blows. Lastly, we have Italy facing a declining birth rate, exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Experts predict that Italy's population will fall drastically by 2070, which could have severe economic implications. Some right-wing politicians blame the decline in births on immigration and call for stricter policies. However, experts argue that immigration is essential for sustaining Italy's population and workforce. It's a complex issue that requires careful consideration and balanced policies. Phew, that was quite a journey through today's news. Now, I want to hear from you, my dear viewers. What are your thoughts on these topics? Do you agree with Farage's criticism of the Tories? How should President Biden handle the border crisis? And what are your ideas for addressing Italy's declining birth rate? Let's open up the discussion and hear what you have to say. The floor is yours. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.